Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Trained and Build Haeem with Fem Orachimaru Part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please give me hype instead of comment and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. A teen sat on a stool in front of the throngs of listening merchants and their children, captivating them with his tales and adventures. This teenager was a pale blonde-haired boy with pitch-black goggles fixed on his forehead firmly. His eyes were equally black but vulpine red pupils that didn't intimidate his eager audience, seeing as he had been part of their society for 6 months. This blonde storyteller wore long-sleeved black shirt with a slashed Konoha Hittite on his right arm and black Anbu grade pants, with a camo red scarf wrapped around his neck. Comfortably. He also had on thick red ninja grade boots that reached only to his ankles, and a pair of red gloves on his hands that waved around, showing all what he had done in one of his many adventures. The person was equally almost as pale as the softly dropping snow that almost eternally fell around Yamasaki Mountain, even though the country it was situated in was not known as snow country anymore. This person placed a hand on his thigh and leaned in, raising his other hand in a claw. Then the marsh fog monster raised its venomous claw and brought it down on me. The raptly listening audience gasped at what he had said. Some of the female adult populace even leaned back abruptly and held their hearts. The storyteller nodded to confirm what he had said was true. His hands were the size of an adult snow tiger and their venom is known to take down 3 brown bears with no problem. What did you do, Naruto-san? A black-haired child asked from the front row. Here the person beamed at the child, then to the audience, displaying his super serrated teeth for all to behold. Again they didn't recoil from him, rather they perked up even more, if that was even possible. Well, I whipped out. Before he could continue he paused and leaned to his right. A black-haired female with a katana sheathed on her back bent down to whisper something into his ear. She wore blaringly white pants and short-sleeved shirt but with a light blood red long-sleeved coat with thick fur protecting her neck from the soft chill that blew through the merchant village. The rogue Konoha ninja quirked his eyebrows at what his friend whispered to him. Are you certain? Quote, very. They're just 50 paces behind the crowd. The blonde looked over the perplexed audience and saw what, or who, his friend was warning him of. 2 people wearing black with red clouds cloaks. One had blue skin and shark-like serrated teeth that glinted at him. There was a quivering thing on his back. The other person was dusting his nails on his cloak and raised them to his orange masked face. Naruto smiled widely at his listeners and spoke up. I am very sorry for this, but it's that time of the week again. The time he usually spoke of was when missing ninjas arrived in their village and attempted to collect his hefty bounty, rather though this time was very different. It was the Akatsuki that had finally found him. The children moaned sadly and pouted. The adults though shook their heads in exasperation. Do you really have to go? An adorable 4-year-old girl with her blue hair set in cute 2 pigtails said. The girl had her arms crossed stubbornly and kept the pose even when a middle-aged man with gray-blue hair picked her up. The other children too were being picked up by their parents. They won't go away if I don't talk to them, he air quoted. The girl sniffed and nodded, but it was really only the adults that understood what he meant. The merchants and their children were now packing into the small, humble houses Naruto himself had helped build when he had arrived, though another middle-aged woman with gray-blue hair stuck behind when her daughter and her husband were inside their house. The woman frowned worriedly. Don't make too much noise. Naruto waved his hands flippantly. It's nothing the kids haven't seen or heard me do, lady. The woman agreed on that point and was gently ushered back in by Naruto's katana-wielding friend. Don't worry ma'am, we'll try and be quiet. Thank you, Aoki-chan. The woman smiled at her and shut the door. The woman named Aoki turned back to the blonde teen and shrugged, making sure to unstrap her katana with the sheath and hold it in her left hand. The woman walked to Naruto's side, standing behind him protectively and held her katana in a ready stance. Naruto though stood straight with his arms crossed. His camo red scarf blew in the wind ominously. The 16-year-old boy cocked his head to the side when Toby took a step forward, not close enough to lunge at the blonde but enough to show that the masked man was the leader of the duo. You are a very hard person to find, Naruto. I've been told that a lot, Naruto replied with a small shrug. So you're here for the Kyuubi? Toby didn't even seem the least bit surprised. Well yes, that's exactly why we're here. So would you be so kind as to not resist? We don't want to destroy this nice place. Oh, you don't have to worry about that. This place is pretty bomb-proof, the boy said with a small smirk. He had tested the buildings himself. Now to get all formalities aside, I will not leave with you, you two will not leave alive, and I will use your dead carcasses to feed my little friends. He smiled a little wider at them, a perfect image of childlike innocence showing. Kisame snorted, but still unlatched his sword from his back. You don't mean that. You obviously haven't been reading the bingo book lately. I recommend the Iwagakure bingo book. Then Naruto snapped his fingers as he was just realizing something. Oh yeah, and I'll be taking your Sharingan and Samahata too. I almost forgot to say that. It happens to everyone, Aoki said to him, very much used to her boss's habit of intimidating his opponent before he really attacked. Don't say I didn't warn you, Toby said. Naruto hunched over a little and 2-foot-long Senbon slid out of the hidden Senbon launchers strapped to his forearms under his sleeves. The lethal needles grazed the ground, and on contact a purple liquid dripped from them and fizzled on the ground. Without hesitation he and his partner darted to the 2S-ranked ninja. Little did Toby and Kisame know, or despite the fact they had severely underestimated the Uzumaki rogue ninja and his rogue samurai partner, they were in for a world of surprise that the rumors that they had heard flitting all over the continent about the boy were indeed true. Naruto Uzumaki was a very capable shinobi. He had been trained by the Snake Sage herself, which was enough proof he wasn't to be trifled with. Team 7 with Yamato, Kakashi and Jiraiya just managed to run in time to watch the epic fight between Naruto and Aoki against the few last Akatsuki members. Flashback. Chapter 1. They were staring again. Naruto, donning a hoodie that was 2 times bigger than him and a pair of black shorts, shuffled through the streets of Konoha, his hood hiding his eyes and some of his hair, leaving his frown to be seen by all who were near and some flecks of blonde hair sticking out of the sides. There was a small bulge in his chest area where he hugged a jar to his chest, a small skittering creature scampering inside impatiently. The 5-year-old boy never liked walking in public view, but the great distrust he had apparently garnered for something that was out of his knowledge had the Hokage place his apartment at the very edge of the residential district, where he would have no other option but to walk a few paces in full view to anywhere he was going. The frown on his mouth deepened, a facial feature one of his age shouldn't have, but one he wore mostly when others saw him. The boy wanted to hiss venom at the old crones that were whispering as he passed, not even having the decency to do so behind their hands or even out of sight. That boy, he's trouble. Tell me about it. Why does Hokage-sama still have him around? They say he even keeps dead bodies in his apartment. The sadistic little devil, Kami have mercy. Quote. The blonde child hugged the jar closer to him and walked faster away from the insistent gossiping and whispers that followed after him like a stubborn fly. He had been living on his own for as long as he could remember, and as far as he knew he hadn't given any of the citizens of Konoha any trouble whatsoever. He had kept to his own and had provided for himself without any help. Naruto walked through a training ground, making sure to pass the very edge so that he wouldn't disturb the genin training there, and entered into the tree line. The boy softly padded through the forest, the dry leaves crunching under his worn but well-maintained black sandals before he stopped under a tree that had a trunk that was twice as thick as an average man but was at the same time only 3 heads taller than Naruto. The boy liked to humor himself by calling it a tree only because it had some sparse leaves on the trunk. It looked like a spike that had shot straight out of the ground that just happened to grow roots and also had some leaves sprouting out from the upper side of the trunk, where branches were supposed to be. Naruto grunted quietly and knelt down beside this tree. He brought out the jar he had been hugging to his chest without anyone knowing. He flipped his hoodie off, revealing the thick black goggles with pitch black lenses that hid his eyes perfectly, lifted the jar to his eyes and peered into it with childlike curiosity. The lenses of the goggles seemed to spin and the edges glowed a faint blue, allowing Naruto to zoom in on the creature inside the jar. Like with a camera, the creature was a spider that spanned the same size as a full-grown man's hand. The tips of its 8 legs and the tips of its fangs were blood red, its bulbous abdomen was black and shivered in anticipation as Naruto looked at it, just as curious, and its trunk was also black. Naruto lightly tapped the jar with his pointer finger before he dropped the jar on the ground. Well. Hello there, Spider-san, what species are you? He whispered this to himself as he reached into his baggy hoodie and withdrew a thick tome from the abyss of darkness there. There was a green seal at the sides that simply said, Species of Spiders. He rolled open the tome and was looking up at the SP. Eider then down at the advanced scroll. He had caught the spider in his bed when he was doing spring cleaning and he felt so oddly intrigued by it he didn't kill it. Catching dangerous animals was Naruto's specialty, so it didn't take him more than an hour of chasing it before he bagged it. his Inuma. N regeneration also helped. It was when he was 3, the only time he ever got a present, when he found the thick scroll on his footsteps. No one ever bothered to check if anything he received was a trap or was even remotely harmful, and he didn't care. He treasured everything he found that was worth money. He had just barely managed to learn how to read by sneaking into the orphanage and attending the classes there among the throngs of fellow 3-year-old. When he had a reasonable grasp on how to read, he dived into the scroll. His first thoughts was wondering why he would find a scroll on spiders in front of his house. The next was if there were more scrolls like that one. Before Naruto had received his black goggles, he had problems with his sight, or his eyes. Any sharp change in lighting would render him blind for a full minute before they adjusted again. This blindness brought sharp pin-like pain to his pupils and a headache that started from the back of his head and spread to his whole brain. This was mostly because the day the Kyuubi had been sealed into him, Minato had made a small mistake by allowing the flow of demon chakra to reach Naruto's eyes. As the Shinigami prepared to take his soul, he had barely managed to correct his mistake by surrounding Naruto's eyes with level 10 chakra limiters and Jinchuriki restraint seals, which normally would have killed any normal person. The Yondaime had proven his strength in seals that day after he had finished, giving Naruto his sight back and also opening a window for medicated glasses to be given to his son, which sadly weren't given to him until his 4th birthday by the unknown person, probably the same person that gave him the scroll on spiders. Before then, Naruto had worn some shades he had picked from a dumpster that weren't too effective against abrupt change in lighting. The black goggles, according to the letter left next to the box that contained the goggles, was fortified by complex fuinjutsu. It allowed him to zoom in, among other things, with a mental command, and carefully regulated the light that entered his eyes, making sure that quick changes wouldn't be otic that much, but at the same time his vision was still clear. Naruto was immensely grateful to his mysterious helper for his 2 gifts. He or she helped him discover his ambition. Reading the scroll on spiders and also the letter the person had sent with the goggles had made him realize that he didn't know up to half of what the person had said. His grammatical handicap had frustrated him to no end. This fact opened his eyes to things he wasn't aware of. Being lower than anyone based on what he knew enraged him greatly, and he never liked the feeling of being mentally inadequate. Even not knowing the answer to something. He wanted to know everything humanly possible. He had already started his quest for knowledge by visiting the library to expand his vocabulary, staying up well into the night reading because the library was open 24/7, and he exercised that privilege fully. The librarian didn't stop him. Quite frankly, the old Chunin didn't care what he did. All that mattered to him was that his books were placed back in prime condition. Naruto wasn't old enough to get a library card or borrow books. Even though Naruto was still very young, he knew that knowing everything was not possible, so he limited his search of knowledge on living things, organisms and chakra. This also included how the human mind worked. First, he had to start reading basic science textbooks with a dictionary at the ready to search for a word he didn't know the meaning of in a scrapbook where he wrote things down in. Though despite little research, the first living thing he had ever caught, the spider, had interested him the most. There were over 47 documented spider species in Konohagakure alone. This didn't mean that there weren't any more species of spiders to be discovered. Naruto ran his finger over the scroll and instinctively searched for any species of spiders that were red, then ones with red-tipped legs. Before he finally found the mysterious spider he caught in his apartment. He sat back a little in shock and tilted his head to the side, trying to make sense of what he had read. He chose to read it again. The sand duster, originally from Sunagakure no Sato. You, my friend, are a long way from home. How did you get here? The scroll says you can't stay 3 hours without the intense heat of the desert. He trailed off when his mind came to a conclusion, or rather 2. You were either dropped off by my mysterious helper, or you were planted. The boy's mouth formed a straight line, a blank expression as he stared at the spider and clenched his teeth. The scroll had said that the spider's venom was merely its saliva stored up for a week. His regeneration fixed any problems the spider had given him, which meant that it was his helper that had planted the spider, because the mysterious person somehow knew of his interest in spiders and his vision problems. Naruto ran his fingers through his thin, blonde hair. I'm not taking any chances. His limited memory recalled that there was an abandoned warehouse at the far edge of Konoha's forest, barely even touching the walls. People assumed the place was haunted, so most, even the shinobi, stayed clear. Naruto was a rational thinker. As young as he was, so he didn't believe in phantoms or anything that had been the result of irrational thoughts. Naruto's eyes trailed to the spider that was still in the jar and he furrowed his eyebrows when he noticed it was running around in circles inside its glass prison before realization hit him. It seemed he would have to visit the warehouse sooner than he expected. He stashed his scroll back into his hoodie and ran headlong into the forest. The warehouse he had been thinking about wasn't too far from his normal hiding place, and his theory was proven correct when he stumbled into an open area where his destination lay. The warehouse was a dark, looming structure that towered high into the sky, from Naruto's point of view, with numerous windows that were broken. The morning sun didn't penetrate the section of forest he was in well, so the structure looked like an evil monster that was formed from the very pits of Naruto disregarded the old warehouse's large front door and rushed to the side door. He used his shoulders to nudge open the normal-sized door, knowing that the front door was designed to be opened mechanically, and sneezed from all of the dust in the air. His eyes watered and he kept the door open so he could get a grasp of the room he was in. It looked like a sort of office, but it had been stripped down of all its contents. The boy gently dropped the jar and shrugged off his hoodie, showing that he was wearing a black undervest under this, IGHTLY wrapped it around the spider. The scroll had said that the duster behaved erratically when it was low on heat, so if he released the spider it would run off somewhere and probably die from exertion. The boy looked around and found that the windows were boarded up. They were much too high for him to pull off, and he knew that since the warehouse had been abandoned for so long, reportedly since the day the Sandaime became Hokage, then there would be nothing to use for a fire there. The boy used the next best thing in his arsenal. He scampered to the spider that had been slowing down and was now behaving sluggishly, and put his hands on the sides of the jar. He closed his eyes and tried to will some of his unnatural regenerative ability out, hopefully in the form of chakra. Kurama stared out of the boy's eyes sadly and shook his head. He would have helped, but his chakra would alert the other shinobi on where Naruto was, and the small child would lose the one place he would ever feel private in. The great beast closed his eyes and sighed when Naruto started crying a little, sobbing out encouragements for his chakra to come out but still wouldn't. Please, Naruto said, the trails of tears flowing freely from his eyes, and he wheezed a little. Please, please, please. This was probably the first living thing Naruto had spoken to. This fact was what bolstered Naruto on to coax the chakra out. The spider was now spread eagle on the ground, his glassy eyes looking at Naruto's futile attempt to summon beast chakra. It closed its eyes and never opened them again. No, 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 this can't be happening. For the next half hour Naruto tried to summon chakra to the dead spider, but it was all in vain. The boy lowered his head and rubbed the tears in his eyes out. He then took the jar and made sure the spider was buried respectfully, or as respectfully as a mourning 5-year-old orphan could do without any shovel or even a kunai. Naruto looked down on the fresh grave. He dug with his hands and he clenched them, dirtied and all. His inadequacy and limited mental abilities couldn't perform the simple task of summoning chakra out of his body. A small spurt of rage erupted out of Naruto and he threw the now empty jar into the dark forest. He heard a resulting smashing sound, telling him that his jar had been broken. Despite basically living in the library for a year and a half and spending more than half of his day reading, he was still capable of anything to be proud of. The 5-year-old boy rubbed his face and shrugged on his hoodie, and re-entered the abandoned warehouse. As he shouldered through the door leading out to the apparent office of the building, he was met with a sight of every surface in the massive storage space blanketed with a thin layer of dust. He held his right sleeve to his nose and mouth, and the edges of his goggles shone blue, then yellow. This feature in the goggles allowed him to get a general look on his surroundings with only a little dust in the air. The items in the apparent warehouse proved what he had read in the library and the rumors going around in the red light district among the prostitutes. The warehouse he stood in was actually a massive laboratory. The former user had even created a wall to his right where he assumed living people were kept as test subjects. The history of the warehouse was that during the Second Shinobi War, a long while before Hiruzen Sarutobi became the third Hokage, a man that had no records in any country on the continent had arrived under the guise of a businessman who sold cheap, but high-quality, drugs, antidotes and medicine to Konoha shinobi and civilians alike at the very same place Naruto stood. The Nadim had been too busy fending off Konoha aggressors to deeply investigate who the man was or why he had come to Konoha with cheap, but quality, aid, but the wise Hokage had created a faction in the Anbu to watch the man for any suspicious behavior. The drugs the man was supplying weren't creating any adverse effects on anyone as far as he knew, but there was no such thing as free, or in this case cheap, Help. Though the man wasn't aware that the very Anbu faction he had appointed to investigate the man had been paid off by this very man to look the other way on his proceedings, the man had been kidnapping Konoha citizens and performing sickening tests on them in his own perverse search for the ultimate drug that would provide for him immortality, super strength and super intelligence. His evil dealings had been successful for 7 years until the Sandaime came was handed the mantle of Hokage. He made the mistake of kidnapping a female Inuzuka clan member. The man had been itching to get his hands on an Inuzuka's brain, to understand the true depths their connection was with their ninkin, and he was very close to but a joint invasion of his laboratory under the guise of a medicine wholesale warehouse by the Inuzuka, Nara, Aburame, Hitaki, Hyuga, Uchiha clans and clan-less shinobi had stopped him from digging his fingers further into the poor woman's head. If she had been pulled out of the forced coma she would have been a vegetable for the rest of her life, so they had to perform a mercy killing on her. The man, despite not having any remote shinobi training, had put up a valiant fight by ingesting a drug that allowed him to expel numerous chakra strings from his pores without any complications and repel the invaders, saving his precious lab from the destruction that was to come. He rammed a needle into his chest to increase the flow of adrenaline and another needle went to his neck to give him super strength. Even with all of his perks, if he had even genin level shinobi coordination he would have lasted longer than a day, but he didn't. The Konoha invaders proved strong enough to take him on. His office had been ransacked of every document he had on his vile experiments and burned, his lab though had been sealed off from the world. It was due to years of deterioration from the building did parts of the initial seal fall off. This was why Naruto had been allowed entry in the first place. Naruto shuffled around and looked closely at the powerful microscopes that had been covered with dust, and then the dirty test tubes and petri dishes that littered the ground haphazardly, probably after their contents had been poured into sand-filled buckets. Naruto saw a primitive-looking screen that had been destroyed and correctly assumed that it was where the nameless man had made his video recordings. From the age of the screen the pictures it would produce would be grainy and lack any color besides black and white. Why bother using it in the first place? The boy ignored the screen and gently ran his fingers over an arm-length open jar that lay on its side. He saw a faint break in the dust on the ground with his now faint yellow-tinted goggles, like the person or thing in the jar had tried to escape but had died. From overexposure to the elements, it might have happened during the day-long fight between the man and the Konoha shinobi. His theory was proven right when he saw a small pile of bones where the faint tracks led. He wouldn't have even caught the track if it weren't for his goggles. He knelt down beside the bones and screwed his lips to the side at how they were. They didn't even look remotely human. The bones looked like a cross between a rat and fish, but as big as a 3-year-old. Naruto picked up a bone and noticed something on the floorboard directly under the pile of bones, a small chink in the wood that was raised up fractionally like the creature had tried to pry it open with its teeth. He slowly removed the hooked teeth from the wooden floorboard and poked his finger through the hole. He felt a slightly cool draft there but not much of a temperature change from the entire building. Naruto ran through all his goggles could do. Blue for zooming in, yellow for a general view on what something was supposed to look like, it usually delayed depending on how complex the thing was, green for chakra levels, red for chakra network and orange for night vision. His secret helper had said that if he grew old it could do much more for him and him alone, but again his age and current mental abilities was a frustrating handicap. Naruto assumed that if he mastered his goggles enough he would be able to unlock or even add X-ray vision to what it could do, but at the moment he would have to see through surfaces the manual way. Naruto grabbed the bone he guessed was the femur and hacked down on the floorboard. He grunted with each downward smash, and when he noticed that he was breaking through the old wooden floor he began bashing the floor harder, more insistent until it broke clean through. He exhaled the breath he was holding and pulled the bone out of the floor, dropping it near him, and he pulled his sleeves to his palms. He used them as sort of makeshift hand protectors. He used his makeshift hand protectors to grab the broken wooden floor and heaved. He heard a small crack and he puffed out another breath before he heaved back one final time. He threw away the wood and painstakingly pulled out 3 more boards so he could see clearer. When he was done he found a dust-coated white lab briefcase. He reached in and hefted it out, shocked by how heavy it was, and lugged it backwards, away from the hole in the ground in case it caved in. When he was in a safe distance he blew the dust off the case and saw the name, Ashitori Roshimaru, neatly placed on the top. Naruto's goggles turned green, showing that he was checking for any sort of chakra seal, and sighed when there wasn't any. He flipped the latch on the briefcase and carefully opened it. his eyebrows shot into his hairline at the things inside. There was a voice recorder tucked neatly to the side, thick notes with neat handwriting inside, something he assumed were memory cards for the voice recorder that were organized by topic and time in pockets at the left side of the case. There was an assortment of pens at the right side that were NEA. TLY tucked according to color, and finally there was a picture of a grinning man on the lid. The man had pitch black hair and was extremely pale. He had on clear, thick glasses under which he had black pupils. His mouth was stretched into a toothy grin, exposing his needle-like canines, and with his sharp chin, nose and posture would have made Naruto think he was a vampire. He was standing beside a door that was labeled X19, and was giving the camera a happy thumb up. From the small door-sized window on the door he saw a small shadow cross. He couldn't see it clearly, but the person looked much younger than him. He was fully donned in generic doctor's uniform with 3 pens neatly placed in his right pocket and a clipboard in his left hand. At the foot of the picture was again that curious name, Ashitori Roshimaru, but this time under that name was the title, Doc Roshi. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows at the picture. It was now obvious that the name of this vile and evil man that had performed vile and evil experiments on humans was Ashi Tori Roshimaru, and that was when something clicked in Naruto's mind. The rat-fish hybrid was what Ashitori had been observing before the invasion, and it had dropped when the doctor had unleashed his chakra strings. As Ashitori ran out to face the shinobi fearlessly, the creature, probably tormented from the brain-numbing experiments, tried to expose where the evil doctor had kept his backup research material, which, like a good doctor, he had in case he was ever to lose his life's work. The creature had died before it could muster up the strength to use its hook-like rat teeth to rip up the FL. Or, maybe from being in the open air for too long, it was trying to show the shinobi where the last of Ashitori's work was so it could also be destroyed. Rather than that happening, its dead body had been avoided like the plague, probably because it had already started to fester and give off a rank id stench. It was not meant for open air. The evil doctor's life's work had survived and apparently was now in Naruto's hands. Quite frankly, the fact he was able to piece that all together surprised even him. A twisted smirk slowly crawled on Naruto's face as he skimmed through the notes, ignoring the parts that were well past his mental ability. He couldn't help himself. A laugh of childish glee escaped his lips. His laughter echoed around the empty laboratory and into the darkness of the woods around. Time skip. 7 years later. Congratulations to all of our new genin, and I wish you all the best in your fields of specialization. The team selection list will be posted in a week, so be back by then. Know that I am proud of all of you. I see great things in your futures. Dismissed. Iruka finished and the excited genin began chattering amongst themselves as they left the class. He smiled at them and sat down on his desk to organize some homework he had given another class. He looked up 5 minutes later when the noise had subsided and just barely caught Naruto before he slipped out of the class, his Hittite tied to his left arm and his black hoodie throwing a shadow over his face and part of his nose ominously. Iruka raised his hand to get the boy's attention. Hey Naruto. Naruto stopped his quiet walk and tilted his head to the side. Sensei, he answered shortly. You did great in your weapons test. Who taught you how to use the Senbon? Quote, I must have picked it up somewhere. Naruto shrugged and fully turned to Iruka. Your taijutsu spar with Mizuki was also spectacular. I mean, where did you get that style from? The spar had been stopped just before Naruto could jam his fingers into Mizuki's neck. Made it myself. I couldn't find a style good for me, so I made my own. Have you named it yet? Yes, I call it the 4-legged spider style. It's still a work in progress. In actuality, it was called the shadow-legged spider fighting style, but it had stages. With each increase in effort, he will add a leg, if he wanted, both figuratively and physically speaking. Though he was limited to only 4 legs, he was confident he would be able to figure out how to get 5 or even more legs without being deformed. Speaking of work in progress, who taught you the shadow clone technique? Do you really want to know? Naruto said with mild amusement lacing his words. The academy teacher perked up. Yes. I won it in a poker game with some drug dealers' bodyguards. Naruto snorted out a laugh when Iruka went. T-pale. They're just big softies, sensei. They took their loss like real men. Iruka didn't ask him how old he was when he won the A-rank jutsu, and he didn't feel like telling. I'm just glad to hear you're not harmed. Naruto nodded and sent a lax two-finger salute to his former teacher. I have to go now, there are issues I must attend to. He walked out before Iruka could respond, and the light smile that was on his face was wiped off in favor of an amused smirk. There was a lot going for Naruto at the moment. He had managed to decipher the notes Ashitori had written and was now sure that his knowledge of the human body was only matched by a medical doctor in the hospital. It had taken him a few months of manual labor, but he had gotten the laboratory and the office clean for inhabitation. The tools he used to clean he had stolen from the cleaning supplies storage room in the hospital. It was kind of sad how low on importance the hospital was, the security there was appalling. The money he had been using for upkeep, which was supposed to come from the Sandaime but still hadn't, was gotten from gambling in the red light district, posing as a millionaire that lusted for money as muck. As he liked winning. Naruto walked away from the academy with his hands in his red ninja pants pockets, his head was down and his eyes furrowed in thought, running through various things in his mind that primarily concerned expanding his knowledge on living creatures. He hadn't yet started actively testing on humans in his laboratory, but he reserved a section in the warehouse where he stored wild animals for experiments there. Though he had been slipping small doses of drugs he had crafted in his laboratory into other students' food, jotting down their reactions. This was after he had extensively tested the drug on himself. There was no drug newly that he didn't test on himself except a few select drugs that would be very detrimental to his mental capacities. One of his minor goals was to harness the animal's power and successfully place it in a human. He could do this with Fuinjutsu, but with how busy he always was, he couldn't find the time to rise past level 6. He was so lost in thought he didn't react in time for a neck grab. The culprit viciously pulled him back into an academy training ground he was passing through. The budding scientist used the momentum of this move to roll backwards twice, and when his eyes were forward again he leveled both of his arms at the person. Glinting silver Senbon launchers twinkled a little under his hoodie's sleeves. Sunlight hit the tip of the Senbon that was ready to be fired. Sasuke looked at him with a deep frown that deepened when Naruto snorted and stood upright, making sure to push his Senbon back into their inbuilt containers with his pointer finger. Oh, it's just you, Naruto said with a downward twitch of his lips, but he covered this up perfectly and smirked at the Uchiha. I want a rematch, Uzumaki, Sasuke shortly said. Excuse me, you heard me, I want a rematch, Sasuke snarled and got into a strong Uchiha taijutsu stance. No, I didn't give you a choice. The Uchiha darted at Naruto and Naruto leaned away from a punch. He stepped away rigidly when a kick was sent at him and bent under a savage right hook. Fight me, damn it. Quote, I'm pretty sure I said no. The blonde boy slipped away from a grasp for his head, stepped away from the rising knee and quickly got close to Sasuke. When he got back to the ground, he swept his feet from under the Uchiha, and as the boy was going down he had a blow to his stomach follow after. Sasuke grunted as the punch hit him as his back hit the ground. That's enough, Sasuke-san. Fight me, Dobi, Sasuke growled. If this is your Uchiha pride speaking, I advise you to discard it. I'm not in the mood to be trifled with. Naruto stood up and dusted down his hoodie. When he noticed Sasuke was gearing his muscles up to leap at him, he leveled his right fist at his face. A Senbon clicked into place on the launcher. I am warning you, Sasuke-san, I am not above killing anyone. The Uchiha snarled and his fingers twitched anxiously. You don't have the guts, Dobi. Do you want to test me? Go on, attack me, I dare you. When Sasuke hesitated, he stepped back. That's what I thought. He spun around on his heels and marched out of the training ground. Meet me when you're calmer, Sasuke-san. You'd pose a bigger challenge then, Naruto said over his shoulder. As he exited the training ground, he stopped and turned to the person he sensed had been following him from the academy, besides Sasuke. The person, Mizuki Tsuji, hurried up to him and grinned. Friend Lily. Hey there, kid. Mizuki-sensei, how may I help you? Both began walking to Naruto's apartment. I saw how you took down Sasuke. I was merely telling him to back off. Naruto stopped abruptly, and so did his former teacher. Either way, it was very impressive. Naruto just shrugged. I was just looking for the best student I ever taught. Naruto, who had continued walking, stopped again and looked at Mizuki suspiciously. Mind I ask why? He crossed his arms and looked at his sensei. There was some extra credit stuff only the best of the best can do, and you, Naruto, are the best of the best. Naruto scratched chin and raised an eyebrow. You're trying to stoke my ego, why? Quote. Mizuki scratched his cheek bashfully and winked at the younger boy. You got me, you're so smart. Naruto rolled his eyes and kept walking. He passed the invisible boundary into the red light district, and immediately he did so he grabbed a ruffian by the scruff of his neck. The child was Basical Lee, wearing gray rags and his dirty brown hair speckled dirt on Naruto's hand. The blond boy mutely stared at the street rat before he slowly brought his hand forward and motioned for the boy to drop what he had taken. The boy smiled bashfully and dropped the brown wallet that was stuffed with SP money notes. Naruto shook his head and motioned for more. The boy looked at him pleadingly, making sure to enlarge his pupils in a perfect rendition of the kicked puppy look, but Naruto raised an amused eyebrow and the boy huffed, crossing his arms for a few seconds before he emptied his pocket's into Naruto's hand. The blond boy dropped the street rat and sharply nodded for the boy to scram. He gave the stolen items to the dumbfounded shinobi next to him. How did he get my wallet? Mizuki quietly asked. You should be asking how he got your wristwatch, your kunai pouch, and the Ika paradise that was in your back pocket, Naruto idly answered. You really should be more aware, sensei. Can I assume you know how to pickpocket too? Quote, I know a lot of things, the boy responded with a small shrug. Now, what crime were you trying to get me to commit? Mizuki playfully punched Naruto's shoulder and grinned, making Naruto glare death at the man. The silent warning already said. Mizuki scratched the back of his head. I like that about you, Naruto-kun, you're straightforward. You haven't yet answered my question. Can we go somewhere private first? I think we're being watched. Naruto began to wonder at this. They were now directly in front of his apartment, but he didn't trust Mizuki to let him in. The man wanted him to commit a crime, for crying out loud. Naruto's goggles glowed a faint red and he looked around. The chakra signatures he found were only civilians staying inside their apartments, no one else. There's no one listening in. I'll take your word for it. I want you to steal something from me, the forbidden scroll where all the village's high-ranked jutsu are kept. I know of the value, but what's in it for me? Matter of fact, why can't you steal it yourself? What if I tell you that I will pay you 70% of the money I will get after I sell the scroll? How much is 70%? About 500 million ryo in cash. Okay, who's to say I won't rat you out to the Hokage? We both know you won't do that. Oh, Naruto asked. You're gathering money and resources for something I don't know. You've also been stalking me, sensei. It was a good thing Naruto was a censor type. He made sure to emphasize the village's shinobi had been stalking him since he had started in the academy, but by that time he already had a blood-locking seal placed inside his apartment door. No one was breaking in unless they blew the whole building up somehow. Will you help me or not? Think about it. All that money will go a long way for you no matter what you use it for. Alright, when should I get the scroll? Quote, my buyer wants it tonight. You can even be there during the transaction. I assure you he's legit. Naruto slowly nodded and shook his former sensei's hand. See you this night then, let's say, the forest at the east side of the village. Perfect. Mizuki grinned gleefully and waved over his shoulder to the boy. Midnight, don't be late. Naruto didn't bother to give him a response. He was busy creating assumptions on why Mizuki was so insistent it was him that got the forbidden scroll. Maybe it was because he thought Naruto would get caught, and when Naruto would accuse him the older shinobi would have the superiority card. Maybe Mizuki thought that the traps would kill him. Maybe Mizuki wanted to kill him so he could have all of the money himself, or maybe Mizuki just wanted to kill him in some sort of elaborate scheme. He didn't really care. Stealing the forbidden scroll would be the ultimate test for his skills in stealth, and if things went south he could always fall back on his innocence mask. His innocence mask was a facade he created that had unfailingly gotten him out of suspicion during the days academy children had been disappearing for 4 hours and reappearing with no knowledge of what had transpired within that time. Naruto though was never present when the disappearings were happening, so naturally people would initially become suspicious, but they were cleared of it after they had tracked Naruto to a library. Naruto knew that his innocent facade wouldn't be enough to set him free from any criminal charges he would get if he was caught, so he pondered on another way to go about it. He walked through the house in deep thought and instinctively went to his bathroom. He closed the door and set a locking seal in place, a solid creation that required his blood to unlock. He went to the bathroom mirror and placed his palm on the surface. He suspected the silent alarm seal. His destination was ringing and he counted to 5 before he channeled chakra, just as a shadow clone in his warehouse placed his own palm on the wall of his office. A complex seal spiraled into view on the surfaces and a burst of chakra smoke covered them. Naruto looked around and saw that he was in his modestly furnished office situated in the abandoned warehouse, while the clone was back in his apartment bathroom. The body switch seal was not as advanced as most thought, it was a level 5 seal with unknown origins that was an alternative for the basic body switch ninjutsu, but it was used for far distances. The boy pulled off his now well-fitted hoodie and hung it on a coat rack in favor of putting on a doctor's lab coat. He looked around his office. Decorated with soothing blue paint on the walls and a solid oak desk with smooth edges, his chair was soft and comfortable but not too soft. There were stacks and stacks of books neatly placed on bookshelves in the wall on opposite sides of the room, and behind Naruto's desk were organized racks. He kept spare lab instruments in case the one in the lab warehouse break. They were held in a thick, see-through glass container that was protected by a padlock and a blood seal. The boy smoothly walked out of his office, his calf-length white lab coat swishing with him as he entered the containment room. He kept his test animals. During Ashitori's time in using the lab, he had created a makeshift wall where he received buyers of his drugs while a single door led them to his laboratory. Naruto had torn down that division and expanded the lab even more. He curtly walked through a room where caged animals were kept, not even flinching when a giant tiger leapt at him but bounced off the reinforced steel bars that contained it. He exited the room and grabbed the clipboard hooked to the wall near the door. He idly twirled his pen and read through what the clipboard said. His eyes flicked up at the few clones scurrying around his lab and performing general maintenance before his eyes flicked to the far end of the lab where a ceiling-high glass container stood proudly. The boy smiled lightly and walked to it. Inside the large glass container was what could be considered a slice of the forest. There were a few shrubs, trees and plants there. He whistled and a light skittering sound met his ears before a monstrous-sized spider pushed out of the ground from a hidden burrow. The spider had a blue with red harshly designed abdomen that had the white kanji for Queen Spider on top. Each letter was speckled with complex seals that combined to form the words, its legs the same height as Naruto and its trunk was black. Its 8 red eyes blinked at Naruto and a single black leg delicately touched the glass container. Naruto smiled at the spider and tapped the glass barrier with his pen. How are you feeling today, Queen? Quote. The spider seemed to roll her leg and experimentally tested all of her legs. I feel great, Naruto-sama, it hissed. Naruto jotted down its reply. My clones say you haven't been resisting your shots, you will be rewarded. Naruto snapped his fingers and a clone walked forward and slipped a small scroll through a one-way opening. A quick burst of chakra to the scroll and 2 dead cows popped out. The spider wasted no time to tear its arm-length red fangs into the fat creatures and injected a corroding venom into them. Your bone growth and development charts are very impressive, Queen. You can now hit a tree without injuring yourself. The spider kept quiet as it kept on sucking the dead cows like drinks, still raptly paying attention to what Naruto was saying. The nature chakra summoning seals haven't been affecting you because you are an animal. He flipped a page on the clipboard. It has fully integrated itself into your bones and your organs. Now you have an official chakra network. Congratulations. Thank you, Naruto-sama. The spider bowed subserviently. I wouldn't have it if it wasn't for you. Naruto waved the praise away. Your charts tell me that you have already laid eggs, a lot of eggs in your cave. Oh yes, the spider hissed. The sperm came from some spider donors your clones had gathered. I estimate they would hatch in 3 weeks. They are your first children and I'm sure they are still getting used to having nature chakra and my chakra in them. Naruto had taken his interest in spiders to a whole new level when he had read about Hatake Kakashi. The copy ninja had personally raised his summons and had used his limited experience in Fuinjutsu to create a summoning realm for the dogs, which wasn't exactly a pocket dimension like most believed but more of an expanse of land Kakashi bought and sealed into a complex storage seal only he could activate. This was super simplified version of what Kakashi really did. Naruto, after relentless digging and smuggling, had found out that there wasn't a spider clan anywhere, so he added creating a spider clan to his many goals in life. The first thing he did was crossbreed a common house spider with a desert duster. Then he had crossbred the offsprings with another species of spider. The survivors would crossbreed with more spiders Naruto smuggled in from all over the elemental nations until only 3 multiple breed spiders are remained. The idea of crossbreeding a creature with so many of its kind would seem impossible if Naruto had not been well known to defy the impossible on a daily basis. Naruto picked the strongest multiple breed of spiders and harvested the sperm from the other. This was where his work got harder. He took a single drop of spider semen and was pushing small pulses of chakra into it for a full year until the semen turned a soft blue. He then took the eggs from the strongest, and still living, female, which in on itself was a difficult feat since that female was now twice his size and very carnivorous, and began to gently push Kyuubi chakra into a single drop. This was done through an airtight reinforced seal to prevent anyone detecting it. The first attempt was a horrible failure with the drop evaporating on contact with the vile chakra, but Naruto had proved his Uzumaki persistence. By administering growth hormones to the strongest spider, he kept a close eye on the development and again harvested the eggs. This time there was a small delay before the egg samples exploded. The blonde boy administered custom-made blood builders that was specifically created for spiders, bone thickening drugs and muscle growth hormones to the female spider. The result was that the spider got even bigger, more intimidating, and more uncontrollable, so much so that Naruto had to move her container outside the lab in case she ever broke out. The drugs he had given were a good idea, but on contact with the demon chakra it delayed half a day before it exploded. The boy then took some brain fluid from the feral female spider and injected it into a lone egg. The result was the egg taking the fluid completely and reinforcing its biological coop. This time the Kyuubi chakra was willingly taken for half a year. Naruto then combined the eggs and the sperms and carefully recorded everything that was happening for yet another year. When the eggs hatched there were 3 dozen baby spiders that peered up at him inquisitively, not showing maniacal traits of their mother. From there it was a survival of the fittest for the spiders until only Queen remained the top of the food chain. The first spider he had gotten eggs from had entered a whole new stage of feral. Naruto had no option but to sedate her for an unknown period of time. His studies with nature chakra had told him that animals exposed to huge amount of the chakra would turn docile and calm, as seen even more when he had applied the seal on Queen Spider. The Queen had said that she was now able to think clearly. All the individual minds of the spider species inside her had now merged and were speaking in one voice, her voice. Naruto had applied a nature chakra summoning seal onto the massive sleeping first spider, and the result, after about 3 nths of continuous exposure, was its black hair and skin turning gray and its size reducing to about Naruto's height when he was 9. He had already pulled the spider out of her forced coma and, much to Naruto's surprise, the spider had taken up clothes making, soothing, calm, quality clothes making. The spider had also been attending the classes her daughter took to learn how to speak, extending it even further by learning how to write. He called the gray, elderly-looking spider, Sagi. It was her clothes Naruto now used for clothes. Sagi could basically make anything he asked for as long as it was a form of clothing. Naruto turned to his right and waved to Sagi. The elderly spider was sitting in her own glass container, surrounded by a similar-looking forest habitat. Sagi beamed at him, her serrated teeth hidden behind her pincer fangs gleaming happily. She was in the middle of meditating while she balanced on one needle-like protrusion from the ground with all 6 of her legs while 2 legs touched each other at the tips. She had said that she had read about summoning elders and was now perfecting her control so she would fit the position of summoning elders. Sagi didn't have Naruto or Kyuubi's chakra in her, just pure nature chakra, and that chakra quickly incorporated into her system. This meant that she was the only one that would be able to perfectly perform Sage Mode among any spider that she gave birth to. Naruto supported her in her ambition by supplying her with history books on the elemental nations and on clan summons. Sagi waved back with one of her legs and went back to her mediation. Another thing the older spider was working on was creating spider clan-based jutsu. So far it was coming along well enough. The nature chakra summoning seal was a level 5s ranked seal Naruto made use of carefully on the Survivin G spider. It was just a stroke of luck that the seal just so happened to not negatively affect animals. The eager to please physical manifestation of Naruto's determination, Queen Spider, had taken all the tests Naruto had given gladly and was now able to grow as large as the Hokage Tower if Shifu nd the strength to. As grueling and borderline cruel as Naruto's tests were, she didn't complain or hesitate. She had learned quickly that she was merely a tool to reach ambition, and she honestly didn't mind. Naruto hadn't willingly abused her, and she would literally not be alive if he wasn't there. The added power that flowed through her body peacefully felt great, and she knew that Naruto had the power to take it from her. She could never bring herself to harm Naruto, physically or emotionally. Naruto had encountered the Kyuubi when he had tested a painkiller on himself, a drug that turned out to be a weed killer. The boy blamed it on the fact that he was 6 years old and still very naive when it came to science. He was sick for a whole week and the great beast had used the reduced mental protection to pull Naruto into the mindscape for a chat. Kyuubi had told Naruto that he didn't really care what Naruto did, all in the name of his life's ambition, as long as he didn't die. Naruto acknowledged that there was a lot he could learn from Kyuubi, and Kyuubi saw Naruto a little competent for a child, so it was inevitable that they would enter a mutual benefit alliance. Naruto had access to Kyuubi's chakra and could ask for help whenever he needed it, while Kyuubi had extended his senses from Naruto, so it included hearing and even to an extent feeling. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki was now instructing the massive Spider Queen to perform different motions and actions. He ordered Queen to balance on a single leg while the remaining 7 legs stretched and touched over her, then to spin a web as quickly as possible. He estimated that the strength of a single web was that of the solid steel support pillars holding up the corners of the cage's tower, not yet up to the main support pillar but a close second, while at the same time it remained as flexible as a rubber band. Queen was able to fire these webs from her abdomen, 8 legs or her mouth. Naruto had been researching on how he could harness this ability into himself. The most he could come up with was taking the chemicals that created the webs from Queen's abdomen and soaking ninja wire in them. This allowed the wire to recreate this ability but to a much lesser extent. He kept the long roll of special ninja wire in a compartment in his Senbon launchers for when he would need them. Creating a summoning realm from scratch wasn't going to be easy, far from it actually. A standard animal summoning seal consisted of many complex seals. A notable one was called the Infinity Seal, which meant that the summoning realm wasn't in some sort of astral realm, rather it was in an overpowered storage dimension where the very air was raw with natural chakra and energy. It was inhabitable for human, but animals thrived in the natural atmosphere. All Infinity Seals were connected to each other, whether they were made since the dawn of shinobi history or even recently like Hatake Kakashi, so it was possible for one summons to visit the other in the summoning dimension. Or as it is popularly called, summoning realm. Infinity Seals though required blood sacrifice, which was why scrolls were presented by the animal summons for the person to sign his name in blood. The signature itself was very useless, but the blood was the chief requirement. The dramatics of the signature was just a formality. Hand seals followed the summoning seal, especially when a blood sacrifice was given. Information about the animal summoning seal was not secret because the village found out that virtually no one was interested in studying far into Fuinjutsu, so the information was more for show rather than application. Hand seals had taken the place of the Fuinjutsu for animal summons. Naruto prided himself on being a very good researcher, or even an investigator, so how to create an animal summoning seal for a new animal summons almost from scratch was given to in his level 4 training scroll for Fuinjutsu, and also from catching a long glimpse of Kakashi's own summoning scroll after he had won a game of cards. The process was painstaking. First, the animals he wanted to summon had to be ready and willing to perform the necessary requirements, then he would have to draw the extremely complex animal summoning seal on a very thick sheet of paper and have to constantly supply chakra into it to keep it fresh. Then he would have to find an expanse of land that he was absolutely sure would accommodate his summons. This stage was usually done by exploring elemental ons for a terrain that his summons would thrive in. After the terrain had been found, he had been recommended to purchase the land because the process of scanning, copying and replicating the land into the Infinity Seal usually took 3 days despite constant supply of chakra. This was because the detail in the newly purchased land had to be perfect and flawless, if not the new summoning clan would break apart. He would know that the process was done when the seal abruptly stopped pulsing out chakra through the ground and through the air, then he would have to carefully tore the animals into he scroll. Immediately after entering the expanse of land would register the life force of the creature, and that was that. If Naruto wanted, he could entrust the animal summoning scroll to a summons for safekeeping, or he could keep it himself, his choice. This process was also regarding the fact that the summoning clan he wanted to create didn't already exist. If not, the Infinity Seal in the summoning seal would suck him in as well and assimilate him with the rest of the realm, which was usually by turning him into the animal summons he wanted to create a clan, for then a few hours later he would turn to stone. Naruto though was 100% sure that there was no such thing as the spider summoning clan. His plan was that a week before the eggs were to hatch he would have already found a place to scan. The blonde boy sighed deeply and ran his fingers through his hair. Raising a 400-pound spider queen was like raising a horse, a very smart, verbally articulate, 8-legged horse. He had educated her on how to read and had helped give her ideas on abilities she could perform with her new Atur chakra network, though he left the bulk for her since it was all up to her on how to use the nature chakra. He reached in through the small window where he could feed Queen and pet her head. The female spider hissed in approval and lowered her head in subservience. He pulled his arm out and turned around, walking to a desk where a powerful microscope stood proudly, gleaming in the bright fluorescent lights in the lab. The clone there shifted out of his way and he looked into the eyepiece. There was a small, flat circular container under the microscope and inside were 2 blood samples that had been divided by a solid glass panel. He looked over his shoulder and said, "Have you started the tests?" Quote. The clone shook his head. "No, boss, I was just about to start." "Don't mind if I do then," Naruto said and turned a knob on the microscope so he could peer closer at the 2 blood samples. One was gotten from him and the other was from Queen. He handed his clipboard to the clone behind him and pointed at a new, state-of-the-art screen. "Keep watch, tell me if you notice something abnormal." On the screen was the same thing he was examining with his microscope. He carefully used his index finger to push the glass panel out of the way and the blood flowed together, the deep red and deep gray. Blood mingled. He adjusted a knob and watched in fascination as his red blood cell merged with Queen's. "First test seems to be going well." The clone wrote down what his boss had said. "No complications so far, maybe because her blood contains some properties from mine." He furrowed his eyebrows and closed his left eye, still hidden behind his goggles, and gently turned another knob. "Boss. My white blood cells are killing hers. How is that even possible?" "Maybe because of the Kyuubi," the clone suggested and scribbled something down. "Probably." The blood samples now looked like they were at war with each other. The red blood cells had merged, one to another, but the white blood cells were eating Queen's, though the platelets merely brushed past each other in their general Lauer rippled to blue before both turned red with the blood. The blood war continued for 3 minutes until only a single one of his white blood cells remained. His cell was still dissolving and absorbing Queen's when the budding scientist was about to call the experiment a failure until, lone defend. Cell divided into 2 identical-looking cells. The cells continued subdividing until they were more than enough. Some died and they were quickly replaced by another. Naruto bit his bottom lip to contain the happily laugh, but he did pump his fist in the air. "First test is successful." The clone wrote this down. "We leave it for a week, keeping up constant inspections, before we move to the second test." "Hi, boss." Naruto had been testing the prospect of injecting himself with advanced spider blood gotten straight from Queen. The test was an initial success, but it told him that if he was to eventually inject himself, he had better be ready to be in a world of pain and fluctuating sickness. He only hoped his status as a Jinchuriki would prove itself even more. This was probably because Queen contained over 500 species of spider gathered from all over the elemental nations and brought to Naruto through shady dealings and smuggling. Naruto pumped his fist in the air again before he felt a small tingle on his shoulder from the silent alarm connect. D to the body switch seal. Half a second later he felt a clone tap his shoulder and presented a medium-sized scroll to him. "Someone slipped this into my pocket, boss." Naruto's eyebrows shot into his hairline. He wasn't scheduled to receive any secret message this month. Who could it be? He murmured. He unrolled the scroll and read. "Dearest Naruto-kun, how's my little scientist doing? I know I've not been the best godmother to you and from the bottom of my heart I am very sorry. I am currently not in Konoha right now. The only way I have been able to send my first 3 gifts to you was through a spy I had from Waterfall that left the gifts for you on your doorstep. Despite this I know you Naruto-kun, and even though I may be a little too late I love you with all my heart. My picture of you may be a little outdated. It's one of you when you just started in the academy. I think you were 8. Speaking of the academy, I know as a fact you inherited Minato-kun's genius. I knew your father. He was the best thing that happened to me, believe it or not. Though I am not his blood sister I might as well be. Minato liked spiders too, you know. He was absolutely fascinated with them, but he was always too busy learning seals with Jiraiya or hanging out with Kushina, your mother. He was a sweet guy. He never liked to disappoint, sort of like you. I have planted some suggestions in Mizuki Tuji's head about you. If I am correct, which I usually am, he wants you to steal the forbidden scroll so you two can sell it to a mysterious buyer. Yeah, no, it's a trap. He wants to kill you. I pushed him in your direction because I have a gut feeling that you have reached a snag in your research. Consider him my 4th present to you. Don't hold back. He has a defective, cursed seal of heaven on him. I'm sure you will trounce him either way. He will probably be fueled by anger and vengeance, so don't let anything he says get to you. I'm sure you are Minato's son, so nothing will get to you. You're a shinobi now, I hear, so that means you can handle money on your own. I have sealed 500 million ryu into this letter. Don't worry, I have many secret accounts in several hidden villages. I merely retrieved 10 million from each of them. The banks are usually used by rich people, so withdrawing that high amount of money won't raise any eyebrows. Money is no object to me, Naruto-kun, and for you I can shower all the riches in the world if it's to get you to your goal. When we meet we can talk more, I promise. Consider the money your fifth gift. I also want to tell you that whatever path you choose I will be behind you all the way. With love, Orochimaru of the Sannin, Snake Sage. P.S. Here's a jutsu that will help you break into the Hokage's tower. I learned it in Iwagakure. It's called the chameleon skin tone jutsu. It shouldn't be too hard if you use shadow clones to learn it. It's C rank, so it shouldn't be too hard. Naruto scanned the letter for any sort of illusion or any chakra fingerprints before he furrowed his eyebrows in thought. He now apparently had a missing ninja Sannin as a godmother. He sniffed slightly and caught the hinted scent of blood, snakes and roses. The blood slightly overpowered the rest of the scents, but he still caught them clearly. It actually made sense that Orochimaru was his godmother. He resembled the Yondaime so much, and since the fourth was a high official he would have to have someone high up there as well. He wondered who his godfather was though. The man wasn't even making an effort to contact him. At least he could sympathize with Orochimaru. She was a missing ninja and a highly ranked one at that. The snake woman wouldn't be able to visit him personally. He gently rolled up the scroll and tucked it into his pants pocket. He would cherish the letter till the end, even if he didn't show it. He looked around and noticed that his clones were staring at him. What? Get back to work. He barked and marched to the massive main door of the lab while his shadow clones went back to attending to his many experiments. He grabbed a mechanical crank on a door and pulled backwards. The doors lifted up like a garage door, allowing fresh air to rustle through the lab. About 50 paces before him and around the lab was the pitch-black forest where the sounds of nightlife came from. He took in a deep breath and walked out, not afraid that the air he was letting in could contaminate his work or even of how dark the forest around him was. It looked to be about an hour after sunset, so that gave him about 5 hours to prepare for his mission. As he walked he held up a single ram hand seal and a clone popped into life beside him. He gave his white coat to the clone, showing that he was wearing a plain black undervest. He tinkered with his Senbon launchers before he summoned another clone, learned that jutsu and make more clones to practice it. I need to get it right this night. Then to his sparring partner clone he said, don't hold back. The copy of Naruto nodded curtly and both darted at each other. An orange glow flashed from a corner far from the cage's tower before it disappeared, as if it hadn't happened in the first place. A slight protrusion rose from the shadow cast by a two-story residential building and darted out, under the soft glow of tea. Moon, it looked like a black blob. The person rubbed his black glove-covered hands and leapt onto the side of a building as his senses warned him of a chunin running rounds through the street. The person was probably not a censor, if not he would have been forced to knock him out. As the oblivious shinobi passed by he skittered across the wall and flipped dexterously onto the roof. The small light that shone down on him showed that the person wore a long-sleeved black shirt and black calf-length shinobi pants. His fingers were covered in black gloves and his feet was also in black sandals, ones that barely made a sound when it touched the ground. Over his head was a full-head ski mask, hiding his blonde hair, with a fox Anbu mask attached to the face, his black goggles still under the mask like it wasn't there in the first place. On his wrists close to his elbow were his silver Senbon launchers, though they were covered under smooth black metal, leaving only the launching points to poke out of the top. He also had a small black backpack on his back that held any equipment he needed in emergencies. Naruto adjusted his mask, briefly looked up and again seemed to melt into the shadow cast by the ledge of the building. Light footfalls padded as he ran at mid-chunin speed, opting for stealth than speed. Before he reached the very edge of the cage's tower, he flipped through a few hand seals, Melian skin tone jutsu. His body rippled and he was out of sight, or more like he blended in with the surface of the tower. Even if the moonlight hit him it would still seem like he wasn't there in the first place. The boy whipped out two Senbon from his pants pockets and jammed them into the sides of the building. He used the Senbon to launch himself high into the air and gently placed his feet on the building, his chakra keeping him in place. He made a slightly violent yanking motion with his hands and the senbon were pulled out and went back to Naruto's hands. He placed the back into his pockets, unafraid if they pricked him, and he skittered over the side of the building eerily like a spider. His hidden goggles adjusted perfectly in the darkness as he peered into the highest window in the tower, correctly assuming that that would be where the forbidden scroll was kept. He kept track of the guard rotation and noticed that there were silent alarm seals on the windows. He quietly pulled out a finger-sized scroll from his pocket, and just as the lone Anbu operative marched downstairs, he unrolled the scroll and placed it on the window. A barely perceptible blue flash occurred that Naruto hid under him, still in his chameleon jutsu, so no one noticed, not even the tiny chakra burst. 60 seconds, he mentally said, and he slipped a senbon out of his sleeve, soaked in blue unknown substance, and created a clean circle on the glass window. He flipped through and hastily grabbed the falling circle of glass into his safe grip, hanging onto the wall through surfak. Walking, he placed the circle back in place and the glass went back to how it originally was, unblemished. The seal he had used on the window was to freeze every other seal within the room and on the window for a minute, so no silent alarm was pulsed to the Hokage as he mutely touched down on the floor. He crouched down and studied the scroll's location, placed on a pedestal in the middle of the room. He leveled his right fist at the scroll and took careful aim before he fired a senbon, connected to a semi-invisible piece of ninja wire. The ninja needle jammed onto the top corner of the scroll. LL and Naruto reeled it in, catching the scroll as it came at him. He exited the same way he came and with the same special senbon just as all the alarm seals came back online. He dropped from the building and shot a senbon connected to ninja wire to the roof to slow down his drop. He pulled back his weapons and ran quickly to where he was to drop off the scroll with Mizuki. He skidded to a stop when he saw a Ninken running as fast as it could in the general direction of the Sarutobi residence. He accurately fired barrage after barrage of knockout poison senbon from his launcher, but the swift TK9 dodged most of them, besides the 6 needles that stabbed its calves and its side, and disappeared into the night. Naruto shook his head silently. The dog had be as strong as an ox to not be knocked out immediately. He too disappeared into the night, making sure not to use surface walking so the ninja wouldn't track him easily. The dog whimpered and swayed as it ran, fighting the chemicals that tried to coo it to sleep. It wasn't so strong, however, and it slumped on the ground. Half a second later a chunin landed beside it and his eyes widened when he saw a oozing senbon sticking out of the dog's legs and side. Naruto, Iruka whispered and felt for the dog's pulse. He sighed when he found one. He summoned a single shadow clone. Go get Sandaime-sama and tell him there's something wrong going on. Take the dog with you. I can't just leave him out here. The clone nodded mutely and ran off to the Sandaime's house with the dog hefted on his shoulder. What are you doing, Naruto? He pelted down the road the dog had taken and found a trail of senbon sticking out of the ground. Now he was sure it was Naruto. Naruto was the only genin in the graduating class that specialized in using senbon with this accuracy. Naruto dropped out of the tree line into a small clearing. He set the large scroll against a tree and took off his fox mask. He took in a few deep breaths. What a rush, he said quietly, under his breath. He placed his mask into his backpack and sat down by the scroll in a huff. I should do this more. His goggle-protected eyes glanced over to the scroll and he was about to reach for it until he heard a rustling in the bushes in front of him. He suppressed a small groan when it was Iruka that came out. Iruka-sensei. Naruto, what the hell have you gotten yourself into? Naruto cocked his head to the side innocently, a sight that sent shivers down the chunin's spine because with the eerie moonlight shining down on Naruto he looked like a pale creature born straight from madness and darkness. I don't understand. Don't give me that. His eyes widened even more when he saw the forbidden scroll seated next to Naruto. Naruto saw his expression and he smoothly got to his feet, putting his hands in the silent motion for him to calm down. The forbidden scroll. I can explain. Why do you have it? Did you plan on selling it? You plan on selling Konoha's most treasured secrets. Iruka-sensei, calm down, Naruto said and was carefully approaching the teacher. The man stubbornly stood his ground. I can't let you do. His distraction cost him. 7 spinning stars nailed his side and he fell to the ground. The blood pumping out of his body was incredible. He tried to stumble to his feet but was savagely kicked to a tree courtesy of Mizuki. The silver-haired teacher grinned at Naruto, an evil, toothy grin. He was getting noisy. Naruto watched in fascination as his sensei wheezed for air, correctly judging that his left lung had been punctured by 2 of the shuriken. Quite frankly, I'm not surprised you managed to get the scroll, Naruto. Oh, you sure do know how to do the impossible, huh? Naruto shrugged. Where is the buyer? Already knowing that there was no buyer. Mizuki, you traitor. Oh, shut up, Iruka. There is no buyer. Naruto-kun, I lied. Shocker. The boy murmured and shook his head. I don't think you understand. I'm very sure that Iruka-sensei has somehow notified the Hokage. They'll be here in 20 minutes tops. We don't have time. Acting had always been one of Naruto's strong suits. No, I don't think you understand what's going on. I lied to you. I tricked you, Naruto Uzumaki, and now I'm going to get my revenge for everything you've done. Naruto raised an eyebrow. I don't remember doing anything to you. An evil chuckle escaped Mizuki's lips. Do you know why people hate you so much? No, Mizuki. That's an S-rank secret. Iruka managed to wheeze out as he struggled to his feet by supporting a tree. Don't listen to him, Naruto, he's lying. What secret? Naruto asked. That you're the Kyuubi. The Yondaime sealed that thing inside you and now you are the Kyuubi. The traitor removed a Fuma shuriken from his back, and now I'm going to finish what the Yondaime started. He hurled the spinning star at Naruto, who he thought was in a daze. Naruto was about to step aside until he felt a small spray of blood on his black shirt. His teacher had taken the weapon for him. Was that really necessary, sensei? He sarcastically asked, but the man had already lost too much blood to know the difference between a sarcastic question and a tearful, soul-wrenching question. You're not the Kyuubi, Naruto-kun. Yes, I figured as much a while ago. Iruka seemed to have tactically ignored what he said. You're a proud shinobi, Naruto-kun, and I'm proud of you. He crumpled to the ground bonelessly. Thanks. A split second later he fired a senbon at his teacher's unconscious neck, the amnesia memory gap drug already taking effect. He wanted his former class teacher to be able to testify in his defense after everything was done. He didn't want to defect from Konoha, yet. He's a fool. Mizuki spat madly. Don't worry, I'll make your death long and painful. It's what I owe you. The silver-haired traitor whipped out a kunai and ran at Naruto. His godmother had already warned him of this sort of thing happening, so he flipped backwards away from a brutal slash aimed for his throat, leading the fight into the denser parts of the forest, a place he thrived the most. As the teacher was looking around for him, swiveling his neck around frantically as he tried to peer into the darkness, Naruto's head slowly protruded out from behind a tree trunk. He licked his lips and accurately fired 5 senbon into the man's flak jacket protected back. The senbon were fired in a straight line, so they all nailed the same place. The man grunted and slashed around blindly. Naruto shot 5 more senbon that jammed into the man's thigh, paralyzing it immediately after the last on hit. He tried to limp out of the forest, but Naruto stabbed a needle to Mizuki's neck. The man crumpled to the floor limply. He admired his clean work with a proud smile before he sealed the unconscious man into a storage scroll. A timer started in his mind on how long before Mizuki ran out of oxygen. The boy slipped out of the forest and knelt down beside Iruka. The man was swirly-eyed from the drug and Naruto retrieved his senbon. He tapped the man's cheek to get his attention, and when the inebriated man did, he quickly muttered, Mizuki tricked me so I could steal the scroll, saying it was to recruit me into a secret faction of the Anbu if I managed to retrieve the forbidden scroll. He planned on killing me, but I overpowered him with shadow clones. You were injured from protecting me. Mizuki was torn apart by my clones and his body parts are all scattered in the wind. Iruka nodded, drunk. Enli, you won't remember what happened. That is contrary to what I have said. Naruto allowed a small burst of Kyuubi chakra to leave his boy, and not even a minute later numerous Anbu operatives leapt down and surrounded him and Iruka. The Hokage dropped down directly in front of him and ordered Iruka to be taken to the hospital. The kami of shinobi stared at Naruto and the boy put on his best innocent face. What happened here, Naruto? Naruto sighed and replied, it's a long story.